Today we're going to be talking about Common Core math. We understand that as parents, there's sometimes a lot of frustration at home, and the new way of teaching math and learning math is so much different than the way that we were taught in the past. My name is Megan Franco. I'm the assistant principal of Northeast and Northwest Schools, and I'm here with.
Mrs. Vienna, and I'm the instructional coach here at Northwest. So, have you ever sat with your child frustrated because you are not sure how to support them in math? Kind of just what Miss Franco was saying. Have you looked at your child's math homework and you wonder why in the world do they need to learn it this way? Well, today we are here to help you answer your thoughts and questions that you might have on today's topic of math.
So math then, we're talking about the math that, how we learn math. So we were taught, here's the formula. When you have the formula, you can find the answer. We were learned, especially with our times tables, if you memorize it, that's how you learn it. That's how you become better at math. A lot of the math was teachers standing at the front of the room, directing students on what they needed to do to be successful. Little attention was made to patterns and critical thinking and problem solving, as well as critical thinking and reasoning. What's great about the math now is completely different. It's putting the ownership back in the hands of the children. So we're looking at formulas and pre-existing patterns, and we're using that to solve new problems. There are eight mathematical practices that we'll get into a little bit later. The practices are aligned to standards that build upon each other from year to year. So, what a student learns in kindergarten, those foundational and conceptual skills are really important from year to year as they continue to build. Students are also being asked to dig a little bit deeper into why the problem exists and find multiple solutions to the problem. It's no longer black and white. We're really asking students to think critically about what they're doing and why they're doing it. There's also there's an in-depth understanding and visual understanding as we use different manipulatives and visual models to help students understand math. And finally, last but not least, college and career readiness. We'll go into this a little bit later, but there's so many opportunities and jobs that are requiring these new skills for students to be successful in their future. So just a quick example, then and now. Again, going back to the math then was very procedural. 3 times 4 is 12. We understood that. We knew how to find the answer, but many times we didn't understand why or understand what that really looks like. So in math now, students are building equal groups with a problem like 3 times 4 is 12, or they're using a number line to get there. And they also understand that multiplication is repeated addition. So they understand that 3 times 4 is the same as 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3. They're going into creating arrays on the right. You can see that. And then it leads into area model, which will then help them be successful when they're learning how to solve area problems. The other thing, going into a little bit higher of math, we've always been taught the butterfly method, if you're familiar, in understanding, how to find out which fraction is greater than or less than another one. You cross multiply, you find the answer on the top, whatever number's bigger, that's the bigger fraction, which is great. And it's a great trick for students to learn how to solve those problems. But really, it takes away from the understanding of what's really happening. So now students are being given different fraction bars. They're finding it on number lines, and they're really understanding. They're getting more of a visual of what's happening in the math. Next, we're going to talk about progressions and how the math kind of builds on itself. But I want to preface it by saying Graham Fletcher is a mathematician who you can find on YouTube, who does a really great job of explaining all the different domains of math, whether it be fractions or numbers and operation, measurement, how that progresses from year to year. But Mrs. Vanna is going to go into an example of this right now.
So in kindergarten, if we're looking at number lines and the importance of teaching number lines, there are so many different strategies in math. And of course, your child should pick the strategy that's most efficient for them. However, there are strategies that continue from grade level to grade level. So for example, here's a number path that they start in kindergarten, and we're going to see the progression of the number line being used throughout the grade levels. Next, in first grade, they're still using the number path, but now they're kind of looking at it more as a number line and using it for addition. In second grade, they're using the number line to help with subtraction and really reason their thinking of what is going on with those numbers instead of just the memorization. So then it can help them in fourth grade, or excuse me, in third grade, they start looking at fractions on a number line. So if they understand how the number line works in previous grade levels, then they would understand when fractions come up in third grade and it won't be as overwhelming and stressful for your child. Then in fourth grade, it goes back to kind of what it looks like in second grade of adding, subtracting, using a number line, but now we're using it with fractions and we're understanding how fractions work with the number line. And then in fifth grade, we have additional fractions with whole numbers and mixed numbers. And again, it's using that number line to understand the progression of the number line and how students can use the number line to help them throughout the grade levels. So then if we kind of look at how math builds on itself and looking at algebra 1 in the future, and applying intercepts and slopes. It's all with number lines and also just how numbers work within the slopes. So when we're introducing number lines in kindergarten, it's really introducing and setting up your child for success later on throughout their career.
So I mentioned before the 8 mathematical practices. This is something that's found throughout all the grade levels, and that teachers are really trying to incorporate within the lessons. So the first is making sense of problems and persevere in solving them. So kids have to make sense of the problem, understand the why behind the strategy they choose, and continue to ask themselves questions as they work to solve the problem. Reason abstractly and quantitatively. Um, they need to understand what they're doing. They can't just be given the procedure and be asked to solve the problem. We want them to understand the why behind what they're doing. The third one is construct viable arguments and critique the reasoning of others. Again, it's that critical thinking component that in the past has really been missing. We're asking students to not only choose their strategy, but also kind of critique other strategies. And in doing so, it really deepens their understanding of the math. The fourth one is modeling with mathematics. Um, so, again, those visuals, making sure that they understand the why and then they have the visuals in front of them to explain their thinking. Using appropriate tools strategically. Students can be given a wide variety of tools and they can choose which to use to help them. So they can be given number lines, manipulatives, rulers, protractors, etc. to help them. Attend to precision, making sure that they're very detailed in their work and they're looking at all the little nuances within the math. Look for and make use of structure. Really just pertains to looking at the patterning within the math and applying one skill to the next. And then this is similar, look for and express regularity and repeated reasoning. Um, Again, this idea that the math builds on itself and using prior knowledge to help them understand the current topic.
And the math today is really building for a future. I don't know about you, but when I was learning math myself in the early grades, a lot of it was memorization when I was in elementary. And unfortunately, my memorization didn't really help in those upper grade levels in high school and beyond because at that point, your memorization doesn't really take you far. And I didn't really understand how numbers work. So, with now, we're building a future of kids and students to understand how these numbers and how math works within itself to better um, go with their future careers. So, Common Core standards have reduced the emphasis on memorization rather than memorize a potential answer after engaging in memorization techniques. Students now have to connect the dots and leverage critical thinking skills. So, now it's not just 3 times 4 is 12. Now it's why is 3 times 4 12? And then how can we use that when math becomes more rigorous? Many jobs have people interpret, evaluate, and analyze facts and information to form a judgment or decide if something is right or wrong. So, as Ms. Franco had mentioned earlier, jobs are ever changing now. And so, therefore, our math is changing.
So, how can we help at home? When you're at home, working on math with your child, the biggest thing is you want them using those critical thinking skills. So you want to ask questions. The more questions you ask and ask them to explain their thinking, it's really helpful. How do they come up with the answer that they came up with? What's another strategy? And the second one, encourage strategies learned in the classroom. So you can find out what strategies the students are learning in the classroom and learn yourself. Have your student teach you, but also encourage them to show you multiple different ways to come to a solution to a problem.
And it's also okay to make mistakes in math. And I think that's really big into factoring with your child while you're working with them is that getting just to the correct answer won't get your child all those points now in these days on their math. It's really how they got to their answer and if they make a mistake along the way, but they're showing their mathematical thinking. That's great. That's showing that they're conceptually understanding what is going on. And then how to help your child at home is to find ways to point out math. So maybe math around you, whether you're cooking or at the grocery store, or kind of just mentioning how math appears all around us. But definitely with having a positive mindset around math. I know math can be very stressful and it's a topic that can cause some anxiety to some. And if we portray that with our kids, then, well, they're going to have thoughts that math is hard and they can't do it. So it really just opens up that mind frame of they can do it. It's just going to take some work.
So that is our presentation. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to myself, mfranco at d124.org, or Mrs. Vienna.
At bvienna at d124.org.
Thank you so much. If you have any suggestions for future presentations, please let us know.
We hope that math becomes much better at home for us all.